My man can't even go a full episode without almost cheating on his wife. I honestly just feel so bad for Sylphie. And honestly, without context, like, if you were just to post a few images of this scene, people legitimately that do not watch Mushoku Tensei will instantly assume that Rudy just cheated on his wife. And it's just, for one, I don't know how this series always manages to do that. Like, it has the most out-of-pocket, like, just down bad, scenes that, like, without context, just makes the series look so bad. Because for a fact, a lot of people that do not like Mushoku Tensei, they look for, images like this, they feed on that, and then they'll start saying this is what happened in the series, when for a fact they're not even watching the anime, or they haven't read the light novel, etc. It's just, I don't know how the series manages to do this, but it's honestly, it's mastercraft. Like, it's honestly, it takes a lot of effort for this to have constantly happening, like, every single episode for Mushoku Tensei. But with that being said, though, this scene is legitimately interesting for a few reasons. I mean, obviously, we get to see the dynamic between, Rudy and Sylphie's grandmother, and kind of like how even when there is a succubus present, and that there is literally almost a moment where Rudy does cheat on his wife, in the end result, that did not happen. For instance, Elena came in, she literally dealt with the succubus that was kind of enthralling Rudy, and then, Rudy that was about to be completely consumed by his own desires, so to speak, actually just was able to overcome them and not actually cheat on Sylphie. So this is a nice little moment, because many people will actually look at this and like, why is this here? Like, why do we need this scene showcasing, Rudy almost cheating on his wife? But we gotta give the context to this scene, and I think it's a very important thing to kind of talk about, is that we know Elena, she is, she's cursed. We know that, because of her curse, she is forced to be with a bunch of different people, or she literally dies. And Rudy, obviously, this is the first time since he's been basically cured of his ED, that he's been around someone for so long away from his wife. So seeing this interaction, it kind of showcases that Rudy isn't going to cheat on his wife, and that he is very faithful, even when circumstances try to shove him down that path, when we have something like a literal creature of desire itself forcing him to pretty much cheat on his wife. So I think that people might be quick to write this scene off and say it is not important, but in reality, it does give context to the journey that these two are having. Now, with that being said, though, let's talk about this episode and a few little things that honestly stood out to me. I really love Sylphie's reaction to Rudy's, journey. For instance, him using teleportation magic to get around the continent. And I think a lot of people might have forgotten about this, but remember, Season 2 of Mushoku Tensei started with Sylphie falling from the sky. She legit almost died, and as we saw from her hair literally even changed. Like, she was using so much magic that her hair color changed into a completely different color, and she's traumatized. She got completely traumatized from teleportation and falling from the sky. And so when Rudy mentions teleportation magic, it makes perfect sense why she would react like she did in such a negative way, and she feared for him, because she's like, what if you teleport and, you teleport in the sky? What if you teleport and you're in the middle of the ocean or underground, etc.? She obviously has a legitimate concern when it came to the topic of teleportation magic. And I love kind of how the entire story comes full circle, back to one of the main issues that has been kind of with the whole story. For instance, like the teleportation, how everybody got teleported around the world, and they don't know exactly where they went, where others went. There's a lot of people that are missing, and, we're back to using teleportation magic. It kind of all ties back in together, and it makes you wonder, how did that event even happen in the first place? And on top of that, was someone really at the root cause of it? Like, did they really cast that spell? Was it just like an error or something, just a freak accident, so to speak? There's a lot of questions, but regardless, Rudy being able to use teleportation magic and actually journey to the desert continent does mean that he will be able to be back in time for his wife's child when she gives birth. And I think that this is a very important segment too, is that even though Rudy might make it, he might not make it in time, he has significantly cut down the period of journey that he was going to have to take without teleportation magic. Because as we know, and he even says himself within this episode, that just a journey to the continent to get there with the quickest way possible would have taken 8 months. And you factor this in, his wife just literally got announced she was pregnant literally last episode, 9 months pregnancy, he was going to make it there, and his wife was basically going to be at the end of, her pregnancy. She was going to have the baby 1 month after Rudy arrived to the desert continent, and let's just hypothetically say Rudy was to finish everything he needed to do to save, like, his family, save his mother, help out Paul and all that. Let's say he got everything done in, like, a week time instead of, like, a full month, and so let's say, his journey when he got done with one section of it was 8 months and a week, okay? It doesn't matter because it would take him another 8 months to get back. So his child would almost be a year old at that point when he finally does arrive. So it's nice to see there is a workaround and teleportation magic is being used because there is a possibility that he can make it back in time to see his child. However, I want to talk about some things, how this all ties in together with the theme of the story, etc. I love how all this comes back to basically the Dragon God himself, which, we all remember at the end of Season 1. Such a crazy scene that blew the entire anime community away when, it actually aired for the first time. And seeing Nanahoshi basically explaining, like, oh, here's different, like, teleportation circles and stuff around the world, it makes sense she would know a lot about this because she did travel with, the Dragon God. So, her bringing this out isn't something that's considered like an ass pull or came out of nowhere. It's been present because we know for a fact that the Dragon God was going around different locations. He was just traveling, and it doesn't make sense for someone to just get from one continent to the other in such a short amount of time without obviously some form of either faster than light travel, so to speak, or just like, the ability to teleport, so to speak. So I think that overall, I love how everything kind of ties back in together, and we even get a little bit of a hint about, the Dragon God and how he is when he does teleport. Like, we see Rudy literally open up a wardrobe in one of the ruins, and he sees one of his outfits, and I think that this is just so interesting, because Rudy, as soon as he saw this outfit, there's probably a lot of trauma and PTSD he's feeling because this character donut holed him. Like, we saw it, and it's just, yikes. This man could potentially just appear out of nowhere. Like, Rudy could be traveling through these ruins and all that, and getting somewhere, and then all of a sudden the Dragon God appears right behind him. Just, for a fact he does not want to encounter that man. He literally traumatized this man for life. I mean, it traumatized him so much, and traumatized Eris so much, that she left Rudy to try to be better, and be a better person for him. So just everything considered, it just, It's a wild event. It's like a wild turn of events that's been happening for these past few episodes, and it's nice to see all these little details kind of tying back together with this episode before we really get into the meat of what Season 2 is actually about. Now, with all that out of the way, there is a few other little details I want to talk about, and that is, I especially love the background art of this episode. I don't know who was working on this episode, but my goodness, the background art is honestly just amazing. I love the desert vibe. I've always been a big fan of deserts and stuff. Like, I think the first time I realized just how much I like desert-type environments and stuff within, like, literature or games and all that was when I played Diablo 2. If anyone's ever played Diablo 2 and you've ever gotten, let's say, Loot Ghislaine for, Act 2, you know what I'm talking about. I've always remembered that theme song, the music that plays when you get there for the first time, and I'm always been a big fan of, like, desert-like continents and stuff and themes of stories, and so this entire, little arc here is, right up my alley. It's, like, one of my favorite things. I love the vibe of this as well. It's like they're journeying through the desert, they have the excruciating heat, we get the vibes of just that this isn't easy travel, it's taken a while, and, like, even though they have a teleportation circle like they got here into the continent and they saved, like, months of time, it's still potentially taking them weeks and days just to get to their location once they're here, because they're just having to journey aimlessly through the desert. And I just like how this little segment, the halfway point, really showcases this. They get from town to town, they have to stop and get some supplies, get some fresh water, they see the local fauna and creatures and stuff that are just, like, mesmerizing and gigantic. And I want to talk about this one, actually, in particular. This creature you see in the background, this is actually just, the words cannot begin to describe just how giant this being is in the background. And one thing I will say that this episode I think failed to really do is showcase how giant this was. I think some might get the impression, but the thing is, you gotta look at it closely. the characters are in the foreground, and you can see them walking, and then you can see in the distance, like the way the distance is, this creature is walking but way off in the distance, maybe a mile or a few miles away or something, and you see how tall it is, and it's like, it's reaching up to the sky where the clouds are. So, this creature is massive, and it's like one of the biggest creatures we have ever seen in Mushoku Tensei, and this might not do a lot in terms of like maybe progressing the story, but it does showcase a lot of the world building, that there is a lot of different life in this world that is just so freaking massive, and like, you know, there isn't just like regular monsters, etc., like, you know, maybe little griffins and all that. And speaking of griffins, I really like this fighting segment, like this animation here with Rudy and all them going after the griffins. It is just clean. Probably the best animated segment of the episode. And, I mean, we get to see the demon eye action. Like, look at this. Oh, look at this smear frame. This is just such a good little smear frame here. And, I mean, we get to see a bunch of different usages of magic from Rudy. We get to see, you know, what Elena is capable of and all that. And she's quite the tank. She was literally able to stall this griffin pretty much by herself. You can kind of assume she probably could have taken this down without Rudy's help, but it would have taken her a little bit longer, so to speak. But yeah, overall, I mean, what an amazing episode of Mushoku Tensei. I love the journey through the desert, and then at the end here we have like this this background shot. Oh my goodness, like look at that, look at the rib cages, which kind of goes back into what I was just talking about with like the giant creature. You could see just like, even if this doesn't do a lot, like this doesn't like progress the story and the narrative of like Rudy needs to go save his family, the fact that the city is built, this giant city, as you can see with like an oasis there, is built underneath this giant ribcage and skeleton of a creature. It's just like, what was this? What killed this? Did it die of natural causes? You know, did someone defeat it? There's so many questions, but the fact that this city is under a giant ribcage, you could assume maybe that creature we saw in the desert is potentially maybe just a baby in comparison to this. So it's just like, there's so much here, and this is one of the big things that like stand out to me when it comes to Mushoku Tensei, like the world building and stuff, with these little subtle moments with the background art or just the characters journeying and going from place to place. You get a lot there, and the series doesn't try to hold your hand and tell you in detail with everything with words. It expects its audience to pay attention and recognize certain things that's going on, and I respect a series that respects my intelligence and doesn't try to, you know, lay it out to me and continuously tell me what's going on. It expects me to pay attention and expects me to know what is actually happening within the story. But I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy my content and you want more of my videos to appear in your subscription feed, do leave a like, do subscribe, do hit that bell icon down below, and I love you guys. Be safe, stay healthy, Chibi out.